Okay, right. Welcome everyone. So I will be talking tonight about an excavation that we did last year. This was a commercial excavation done as part of the planning process. So this was done in advance of the development of social housing at Rachub. And this was paid for by the developer. In this case, the developer was ADRA, who build and run social housing. So as part of getting their planning consent, they had to actually pay for us to excavate the site and record everything that was there. And the site itself is just outside Rachub. If you can see that, so there's Rachub. For those of you who aren't quite sure where Rachub is, it's just outside Bethesda. Bethesda is just off the map down there. So this is the A5 running through to Bethesda, and the River Ogwen down at the bottom here. So quite close to the edge of the hills as well. And the red splodge there is our site. As we often do on these sites, it's a staged process. And in 2019, my colleagues did some evaluation work on the site, that they did a geophysical survey. And this is the plot of the survey. You can see there's a water pipe running through there. And actually this here is a high voltage electricity cable, which is always slightly worrying to have on your site. But I don't know about you, but I can't see an awful lot more on that. So that wasn't particularly useful. So they also did some evaluation trenches where you dig fairly small, narrow trenches to see if it's sort of keyhole look to see what's there. And one of those trenches, you can see this sort of area of brick and some stones. So that suggested that there was a building on the site. And another of the evaluation trenches had a narrow slot, which actually seemed to be slightly curving and had flat stones over the top of it, with a post hole and a few pits nearby. And the archaeologists digging this thought this is a drain of a roundhouse. And actually they got some radiocarbon dates from that. And actually it might be slightly hidden behind there, but these came out as late Iron Age and early Roman period radiocarbon dates, which fit perfectly well with the idea of it being a roundhouse. So it looked like there was fairly important archaeology on the site. So the next thing was to strip a fairly significant area of the site. So this is taking off the topsoil and the plough soil with a big machine, but under very strict archaeological control. And the object of this is to get down to either the natural sort of fluvioglacial deposits. So the natural deposits were left at the end of the Ice Age, which is a sort of yellowish sort of clay that you can see here, or down onto sort of obvious archaeology. And it's in the natural deposits, you can actually see cut features that show where archaeological features are. But some of this site is a very rocky site, and some of it, all we got was loads of boulders, and it's very hard to tell which of these boulders were significant and which weren't until we actually started cleaning it up. So the next stage is to clean everything carefully by hand, so you can really see what you've got. Then we could actually start recording it and excavating it, picking it apart a layer at a time. And the recording involves, we take lots of photographs, we make all sorts of detailed notes and note the relationship between different features, and we also do lots of plans. So this is an example of a scaled plan here, showing gullies here, and you can see sort of the hashes showing the slope down into the gully. But we also do sections through features, so you can see sort of the profile. of across the features and how the different layers have built up. So we get a really detailed record of what was there. And we actually started this excavation in late March 2021, when it was still snowing, and worked through the summer. And this photograph shows the one really hot week last summer, when I had to run around and try and get some gazebos to give a little bit of shade for people working there, and then carried on working right through till the end of January this year. So actually over 9 months on site digging. So this was really quite a long excavation, because it turned out there was actually quite a lot there and a lot of detailed archaeology. And I was saying that one of the evaluation trenches showed we've got a building. In fact, before that, we suspected we would have buildings, because the first thing we do is look at available map evidence and other clues to what might be on the site. And this is a very nice map from the Penryn estate. This is dated 1855. And this shows, there's Rachub up there, and this shows all various farms that were around at the time. And if we zoom in to here, so this is our site in this sort of area here. And here we have the farm of Kevin Bedu. So we knew there was a farm on the site, and that is actually what was found. So when we stripped further, we could actually see the farmhouse itself. When I first saw this map, actually, I thought that this building here was probably the farmhouse, because it seems to have a little porch on the back and things. But in fact, it's the building next to the road was the actual farmhouse, and the other building is sort of outbuildings. So this is the farmhouse. Rather not very well preserved. We've got one good wall along one side and most of the back wall, but very little of the rest of the walls. So it's been demolished right down to foundation level and beyond. But you can see actually the floor level survived pretty well. So you've got areas of some earth floor and some slate dust flooring and some slate slabs, and lots of drains underneath the floor here. So here's the side wall, the wall that survives best. And you can see in here that it was actually terraced into the slope. And in fact, the foundation level that survived is basically sort of just a revetment of the slope, and then the main wall would have been built on top here. And at the end, there's a very nice fireplace. So here you've got the fireplace with sort of the coke and ash from the last fire within it, and then this sort of shelf next to it with a very nice slate slab on top. And here's the view from the top. So here's the slate slab on the shelf, and you can just see it's right in the corner of the farmhouse here. And here is the fireplace when it was sort of fully emptied of the remains of the last fire, and you can see this nice hearthstone at the bottom. See how it's cracked with the heat. And here's a view from the top showing the flue here, so that's going up into the chimney. And actually next to this, there was the remains of what's either an earlier oven or in fact another earlier fireplace, which was actually blocked in with stone when this the last fireplace was put in. And next to that, there was also these bricks that we found in the evaluation trench. These look a little bit like an entranceway, but in fact, the traces of the wall that we have got suggest that there was no entranceway at this point. And this is probably the base of an oven, a larger oven. And here you can see some of these drains under the floor, including a drain here with these roof slates put almost like playing cards sort of held together to actually form the drain, and a drain along the base of the wall. I'm not quite sure why it needed so many drains, there weren't obvious sort of access points for sort of pouring fluids into these. So whether it's just rather wet and they needed to drain under the floor. So that's the farmhouse there, and then behind it we have the barn area, barns and outbuildings on the map. This was actually really hard to find on the ground. You've seen that the farmhouse was quite well demolished, and the barns were almost entirely demolished. The map, this map is dated 1855, but when you get to the early OS maps in dating 1889, there's no sign of these buildings on those. So actually, rather than these being left to sort of fall into ruins when they stop being used, looks like they were demolished very quickly. And I think that's because they're part of the Penrhyn estate. So once they were out of use, they wanted them out of the way, and then they could reuse the fields. So I think they made a really good attempt at demolishing these buildings. So this is the best preserved bit of the outbuildings, and this is actually the end wall of the outbuildings. So you can see you've basically got two foundation stones in there, and just a few stones that are sort of chock stones to support the foundation stones. And then some of this slate dust flooring inside. And then there's just a few stones of another sort of partition wall in the middle, which was why we really sort of struggled. We were expecting to find this big building and very little of it remained. The rest of it really was just defined by drains running underneath the building, including this one with this slab over the top. But round the back of the building, there was a whole area of cobbling with actually a couple of phases of cobbling. So this is sort of a farmyard around the back of the outbuildings. And obviously this farm is set in its fields. We did actually sort of try and strip quite a bit of the sort of fields around and didn't find an awful lot in this area. Though they're just traces of earlier walls. Possibly these even might be Iron Age walls, but really not much surviving. But you can see all these boulders scattered about everywhere. And in fact, another bit of the fields here, you've got incredible density of boulders in these fields. So these would have been really difficult to cultivate, though they definitely had been ploughed. And in some places, especially close to the farmhouse, you could actually see they were trying to get rid of the boulders out of the level of the ploughing. And I don't know if you can see on this photo that here is part of a drill hole through this boulder. So you've got a boulder set into the natural deposits, firmly set in, but its top has been blown off. And here's another big boulder, and actually there's a drill hole in the middle there. So that's been blown in half. And here's actually the top part of a boulder. You've got the drill hole there. So this has been blown up, and then part of that has been removed and dumped elsewhere. And I've excavated a lot of sites over our area, and I've never actually seen this before. So I think this is something quite peculiar to the Bethesda area, where in the late 19th and early 20th century, there were plenty of people around who knew how to use gunpowder and could probably bring a little bit home with them from work in their pockets. So I think this is a definite sort of Bethesda way of removing awkward boulders out of the level of the plough. So we've got this farmhouse. We were wondering whether it maybe was used a bit earlier, perhaps started off in the medieval period, but we found absolutely no evidence of that. So it looks like it was built in the late 18th century. But as we were removing some of the rubbish from just outside it, immediately under the layer of the rubbish dump, we were finding Roman pottery, including this piece, which is a really large piece of Roman pottery. And the kind of fabric suggests that this is part of an amphora. And amphorae were big jars that were used by the Romans for transporting things like wine and olive oil and garum, this particularly smelly fish sauce that they used to eat. And usually these are quite narrow vessels, really tall, but quite narrow, so they could stack them in ships. But this is a really big curve on it. This is from really quite a big fat vessel. Actually at the Roman fort at Caerclegui, dug in, I think, the 1920s, they found an amphorae that had this really big sort of fat belly. So I think this is exactly the kind of thing that our pottery came from, which makes you rather wonder whether they were actually drinking wine in Rachub in the Roman period. But maybe it was just a useful vessel to use for other things. So we wondered, where was this Roman pottery coming from? And we really cleared around the area as carefully as we could, looking for post holes and things to try and find some kind of building that this was coming from. And we couldn't find anything. But as we dug under the farmhouse, we realized there were actually pits directly under the floor of the farmhouse. And here's one pit which is actually going under the farmhouse wall. And if you can see that little red spot there, that's actually a bit of Roman pottery. So these were actually Roman pits. And here is a hearth. You can see all the black material in here. This has been half excavated, so you can see how deep it is. And you can see this is actually just clipped by one of the drains in the farmhouse. And this is really just below the floor. It's amazing this has survived. But this is again a Roman period hearth. So this looks like this is inside a building. And there were various other pits and post holes. And I think this is either an oven or a corn dryer here with Roman finds within them. And we didn't quite find enough to really define the shape of this building, but I think this was almost certainly a Roman period building in the site that was then later used for the farmhouse. And when I say Roman period, I mean it was used during the time that the Romans were occupying the area, so from about 77 AD onwards, but almost certainly it was actually built by the local people in the area. So not a Roman building actually built by Romans, but by the local people. So that's one building on the site, but we knew there was a roundhouse. And actually, almost as soon as we started stripping that area, we could definitely see that this was a curving gully here. And then when we got it cleaned up, you can see this is the gully coming round with slabs over the top. So this is a drain, a capped drain. So this would drain sort of just inside the wall of the roundhouse. And here it is a bit more cleaned up, and actually you see the red there. So the natural sort of glacial clays have actually been burnt red, and there was a lot of charcoal in the drain itself. So I think actually this roundhouse burnt down at the end of its life. And here's that drain again, and next to it you can see rather chaotic looks up collection of stones, but some of them are wedged on their edge. And once those were taken out, you can see this is actually a slot coming round concentric with the drain. And I think this is where the wall was. So I think you would have had planks set on edge and then packed in place with those stones to form the wall. And here we are rather more fully excavated. So you've got the drain here with the capstones taken off, apart from in this bit where it's running out of the roundhouse there under the wall. And inside you've got post holes that would have supported the roof, and lots of pits, lots of activity going on in the middle, and then the slot for the wall running around the outside there. And this is rather slightly confusing because there's actually some post holes in the bottom of this drain, which doesn't make much sense to me, but I do rather wonder whether the drain started off as a wall slot with the posts helping to support the wall, And then the roundhouse was made slightly bigger, and they turned this wall slot into a drain, and they moved the wall slightly further out. But in that drain, once we took the capstones off, my colleague Rob found this object here, which had actually been stuffed down the drain under the capstones. And if you look at this, it's nearly a metre long, and this is actually an iron object. Although obviously the Iron Age, they were using iron, it's fairly rare to get large pieces of iron in the Iron Age or early Roman period. So this has sort of got a cylindrical shaft with a flat bit on the end. We'll have to get an X-ray of this to really see what it looks like, because it's very corroded. It's certainly not a spear or a sword, and I don't think it's part of a chariot. But at the moment, I think we're speculating it could be some kind of spit or part of a fire dog to support a spit over a fire or something of that sort. So this is certainly one of the more spectacular finds that we've got from the site. And here you can see the roundhouse again. So you can see the wall slot coming around here with the drain inside. And you can see the way it's been terraced into the slope here. And here's the other part of the wall slot coming around the other side of the area. So that's the sort of full circle of the roundhouse. And this is cut into what looks like the glacial deposits. But in fact, we could see there was actually soil going underneath that. And in fact, what they've done here is they've created a terrace by cutting in at the top end and then dumping that soil at the bottom end. So you've got sort of a cut and fill platform to build the roundhouse on. And here we've actually, this is the deposits of the platform there, and these big boulders are within it. And here we've sort of dug through that, and you can see the grey here, and that's actually the ground surface before they were built the roundhouse. And here you've got the section through the platform with that layer of the original ground surface underneath it. So we've got one roundhouse in this area, and we could see when we cleaned that up that just next to it, there was definitely other things going on. And this is to give you some idea of the kinds of things that we look for. So you've got sort of the yellow here of the glacial clays, and then the sort of a band of darker soil here. But it's not at all clear what this is until you actually start excavating it. So we tried to dig that, and we could actually see that the darker soil was filling in, again, these sort of gullies curving round. But you can see here, they're going underneath the edge of the excavation. So we obviously needed to excavate more. So we got agreement to strip more of the site. And then we could actually see these gullies coming round in full. And actually, you've got at least 3 of these coming around. And these look, again, like these wall slots. So this looks like slots for a roundhouse, and it's probably been rebuilt maybe 3 times. And if we look from the air, we can see these curving round very nicely here. So we've got another roundhouse in here. And you can see lots and lots going on. I really wanted to get a nice sort of ring of post holes to support the roof, but it doesn't quite work. So I'm going to have to think about that to see how the roof is supported. Lots going on in the middle, including this little hole right in the middle of the roundhouse. So clearly to do with what's going on in here. And when we first saw this, it was basically just a red splodge, but we could tell there was something interesting here because we could see there was actually slag within this red material, and a bit of careful cleaning and excavation. And in fact, this is a furnace, and you've got a lining of clay around it, some of which has been heated up so much that it's vitrified. It's basically almost turned to glass. And then in the middle here, there's a whole mass of the slag from the last time it was used. And then under that, it was all charcoal underneath. So they've left sort of the debris of the last use in it. And then as it was excavated, you can see rather more clearly sort of the shape of this sort of bowl furnace with the clay lining around it. And certainly we've got a huge amount of slag from this, which our specialists will be able to look at and find out exactly what was being smelted in here. But he reckons from the way that the heat has affected the sides, that it was probably iron smelting. So it looks like we've got smelting going on in the middle of this roundhouse. Also, lots of little stake holes, which look like they were supporting just little structures, perhaps for hanging things on. So there's a nice little sort of circle there. And here we've got this sort of arc here and lots of other ones going on here. So this is all sort of suggesting there's lots of little tasks going on here, probably fairly industrial. So although it's a roundhouse, it doesn't look particularly domestic. Also quite a lot of post holes, not all of which are currently making sense. But this is quite a nice example to show you what post holes are. So that if you want to put a post in the ground, you would dig a hole of the required depth and rest your post in it. And then you'd pack around the post with stones. And here they've packed it very carefully with sort of long stones set on edge right the way round. And in this case, the post seems to have rotted in place. It hasn't been pulled out. So the stones haven't been disturbed. So you can still see exactly the space that was left for the post in the middle there. We've got these two roundhouses here. So this is the first one that we found, and this is the other one with the furnace in the middle. You can see they're overlapping. And in fact, the one with the furnace seems to have been the earlier one, looking at the stratigraphic relationships. And then this other one is later. So these were occupied sequentially. But these weren't just on their own, that across to the side here, there was a whole scatter of other little post holes and the odd little half. So sort of little structures scattered about. And this, which is actually a square structure. So you've got post hole there, 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 and there. So you've got this square with other sort of smaller post holes in between. And this actually looks very much like a granary. So you've got the post holes quite close together because grain is very heavy. So you need a lot of posts to support the floor. So I think this is a granary just outside the roundhouses. And then actually not part of that, but just nearby, there's another post hole that's rather bigger. And this again was very carefully lined, but had a slab in the bottom to rest the post on, which I thought was a little bit odd because the glacial deposits here are really quite firm, and I didn't understand why you needed a slab to rest the post to stop it sinking until we actually took this lining out, and underneath there's another post hole, an earlier one. So it looks like that there was a post here that has rotted away, and it was so important then they then replaced it in almost the same location. But there were no other posts that went with this. So this wasn't really a structure. There seemed to be just one post on its own, and really quite a big one. So you start thinking about totem poles and things, but I wouldn't be absolutely sure about that yet. So this site sort of slopes downhill gradually to a stream at the bottom. And the roundhouses we're looking at are fairly close to the stream. And here's the stream running across here. And this is a drone photograph taken during the evaluation phase, showing this area undisturbed. And this is basically a boggy mass down here. And during the evaluation, they're trying to sort of work out what might be going on down here, and you can sort of see a few stones sticking out, but we really sort of struggled to work out if there was anything significant there or not. We were a little bit worried there might be a great depth of peat and all sorts of exciting organic remains there, but we had an auger survey done and actually found the peat wasn't very deep. So we didn't have to worry too much about survival of organic remains. But eventually, once all permissions were in place from the ecological point of view, we were able to get in there and see what was in this area. So this is just stripping that, and you can see actually almost immediately below the turf here, there is stone coming out. And this shows what you could see straight after stripping it. You can see actually we're right very close to the stream here, and we really struggled in this area. This was always wet. I don't think it was wet when it was actually in use. I think drainage has changed here, and it's actually a lot wetter now than it was in the past, but it was certainly rather too wet for excavating, making things difficult. But you can see in here, there's sort of almost a little enclosure, which I think is probably some kind of pen. And in fact, curving round here, there is a stone-walled roundhouse. And actually, you can see these rather better on this image. Although we did a lot of our planning on site in the traditional way, drawing by hand, we were also using more up-to-date methods. And this is actually not an aerial photograph or a drone shot. This is a combined image, which is known as a photogrammetry orthomosaic, and is actually created by taking lots of photographs from a camera pole a couple of meters above ground level. And then we have a computer program that joins all these together. And we have some targets that appear in the photographs as well. And we survey those in so that we can actually locate this precisely and we can scale it. So we actually have something that we can create plans from. And here you can see this pen here, which has an entrance in there, and there's one there, and there's actually another one through there. So lots of entrances into this. And you can just see here, the wall carrion round here. This has been really heavily damaged, but there's actually the wall of a stone-walled roundhouse in there. And an enclosure wall coming round here with some kind of odd thing added onto it there. This is part of the pen here. You can see it's all rather collapsed, but inside you could see sort of the face of the wall inside. And this is one of the entrances into that pen with this sort of cobbled surface inside. And at the far end of the photograph, there's a very confused area. So this is a more detailed orthomosaic of that area. And actually there'd been a lot of dumping of stone here. So I think fairly recently, this area had sort of been flattened off and used for dumping stone to get it off the fields. But I think there was probably an 18th century wall running through here. But you can also see this line of stones here, and that's actually a wall face. And at the bottom here, this is the ground level photograph of that face, composed of big stones set on edge, what we term orthostats. And behind it, there's another line of facing stones. And this sort of orthostatic construction is very typical of Iron Age walls. So that's the orthostats there. And here's the other face. So this is the width of that wall there. And this is a shot of the roundhouse, which really is quite difficult to see on ground level because it's been so badly damaged. another shot which may be a little bit clearer. And then a bit more clearing, fighting the tide of the water. We could actually see there was actually another stone-walled roundhouse next to it. So you can see the base of the wall coming around here. And then this is inside the roundhouse. And basically the water was coming in as you were digging. So you sort of bail it out and dig a little bit and it's coming back in again. But just about managed to expose a little area of burning in the middle. So there was a half here and managed to take a sample for radiocarbon dating. So hopefully we'll be able to get a date on when these roundhouses were occupied. And here's one of these photogrammetry orthomosaics. So you can see it's a bit clearer. So that's actually the edge of the pen there with the entrance through. And here you've got one roundhouse, the wall sort of just surviving there. And that would have come round in there. And then here you can see that's part of the wall of this other roundhouse, which we didn't entirely expose because some of it went out of the trench. So we've got quite a lot going down here, sort of enclosing walls and two roundhouses, stone built in this case. And up here we've got our two roundhouses, which would have had wooden walls. Between them on this photograph, there's a bulk, and that's because that's where this high voltage electricity cable ran through, which we were quite sensibly avoiding. But as the excavation was going on for quite a long time, and the developers wanted this cleared off, we actually stripped along this before they actually turned this cable off, having carefully established how deep it was and realised that it was actually safe enough to strip over. And actually found there were quite a lot of post holes and things going on in between here as well. So these sort of two groups of two roundhouses are really quite close together. Whether they're connected, whether what the dates are on these, we'll have to wait until we get radiocarbon dates back and see. I suspect this is sort of a whole sequence of being occupied at different times. There's also another wall coming off here, which we thought might be part of an enclosure wall all the way around this area. And here's the orthomosaic of that. So you've got really quite a wandering sort of wall made of big stones. And these walls are really difficult to date. This wall actually appears on some of the map evidence, but then some walls, which I'm sure are Iron Age, also appear on the maps. So how do you date a wall? One way of doing it is to actually date the last time the soil underneath the wall was exposed to sunlight. And you do that with optical stimulation luminescence dating, which I won't explain quite how that works because I'm not entirely clear. But we got down this gentleman from the Scottish University's Environmental Research Centre near Glasgow to come down and take samples from these layers immediately underneath the wall, so he could actually get some of these OSL dates on those deposits. And although we haven't got radiocarbon dates back on this site yet, we do have these OSL dates, which are quite interesting for this area. So that sort of wandering wall that we were looking at just off this image actually came back as being mid-18th century AD. So that is actually really quite a late wall, which is why it appears on the maps. We've got this sort of enclosure wall coming around here, but built onto this, so what sort of looks like a platform, which I wasn't really sure what this was, but we got a date of 17th century AD on that. And I suspect this may have been a deliberate sort of widening of the wall at this point to turn it into what I know as a consumption dike, where you're deliberately using up stone by making a particularly wide wall. So I think that might be what that is. But that's built up against this enclosure wall, so this wall can still be earlier. Luckily, so we've got the pen here, and the date we got from under that is late Roman. So at least that looks like we're in the period that we're looking for. And I think the roundhouses are sort of connected with that. So at the moment, I'm guessing those come out to be Roman period. And this orthostatic wall at the top, which I think is part of this enclosure wall here, I'm not sure if you can quite see that, but that actually came out as Iron Age. So at least this Iron Age style wall is Iron Age, which is always very satisfactory. So quite a lot going on in this wet area at the bottom of the site, but this is suggesting that it's all going on at different periods. So we may even have an Iron Age field that then the houses are built inside. So we definitely don't have to have a look at how all that works out. So while we were doing this lower level that we were rather worried was going to start flooding, we left some of the archaeology that we knew about a bit higher up. So some of the last things we did was excavating an area next to the road, not far from the farmhouse. And you'll remember that underneath the farmhouse, there was Roman period activity, probably a building under there. And this area is very stony, but as we were cleaning all these stones and taking them down, we were getting quite a lot of Roman pottery and other Roman artifacts from this area. So this seemed to be another area of Roman period activity. And once we got a lot of the stone off and we could actually see what was going on, you can see here we've got a semicircular drain, and at this end it's capped by these lovely slate slabs. So this looks like another drain inside a roundhouse. We didn't find a wall to this, so this may actually have been a clay walled roundhouse, and it's very rare that clay walls survive at all, really. They often get ploughed away and you get no trace of those. But this is really, I think, quite important. This is Roman period in date. We've got some Roman pottery actually from just the fill of the drain. And these are large slate slabs covering this drain. And this certainly appears to be quarried slate. We know that the Romans were using slate, Corian slate, around the area, certainly in the Nantla Valley and maybe also in the Bethesda area. But as far as I know, nobody's actually suggested that the local people were actually quarrying slate, but this suggests that they were. Not entirely surprising because you've got plenty of slate accessible really quite close by, but it's very nice to have this kind of proof. And at one end of the drain, there's yet more slate slabs, possibly forming an entrance into the roundhouse. And within this area, lots and lots of things going on, all sorts of pits and things, but a lot of this is all different phases. So whether it all belongs to this roundhouse, I suspect there's actually other structures over the top here. And here we've got what looks like a hearth, but actually underneath here, there was a big pit with a gully running out of it or into it. But here you actually see these are sort of stones lining a little post hole here, and there are other post holes in this area, clearly cutting through all this. So I think these might belong to a later building. Again, quite a feeling of sort of industrial activity here. And in fact, from about this area for some of these deposits in the pits under here, we got a small copper alloy plaque. I say copper alloy because you get various different alloys of copper, but this is probably bronze of some sort. You have sort of bronze and brass and things like that. But this is probably some kind of bronze. Small plaque, you can see that's 8 centimetre scale there, not very big. But again, that's quite a nice little object. This will need cleaning up and x-raying to try and work out exactly what that is. Again, in the same sort of area, lots of other things going on. That's the base of a hearth there. You can see that the slate is shattered with the heat. There's another slate slab there that's actually collapsed into the pit underneath it. Post hole next to it. And there's an area there that had a lot of slag in it. So again, lots of evidence of industrial things going on here. And next to this area, again, we've got more curving gullies. So you've got a curving gully here, which seems to be capped, which makes it look like a drain. But actually, when that was excavated, it looks more like one of these curving wall slots, with actually probably another slot inside it. So I think that this is another roundhouse with these sort of wooden walls. Obviously, with all this, we've done all this excavation, but this needs a lot of piecing together, looking at all these different plans, looking at the evidence we've got before we can really understand what we've got here. And certainly this area was so complicated that I'm not really going to understand what we've got until I put all these plans together and look at the sequence, look at the stratigraphy, and pick it apart. So this is definitely something that will come out in what we call the post-excavation phase of this. So this is certainly an area that my ideas on it might change, but at the moment it looks like, again, we've got another 2 roundhouses here. And just next to those, there's yet another furnace. So this is a very small sort of bowl furnace, and you can see it's lined with clay and also lined with stones. And again, we got quite a lot of slag out of this. And I'm assuming that this is Roman period to go with these 2 roundhouses, but we will have to get radiocarbon dates to confirm that. And this was within another area that's sort of defined again by slots lined with stones that currently don't quite make sense, but again, maybe putting the plans together, I might be able to turn this into some kind of structure. And near there, there was a patch that there didn't seem to be much going on, but I thought I'd better give it a good clean just to make sure. And actually found just a small area of cobbling, which doesn't look that exciting. But then where that tag is there, out popped this little object, which actually has quite a little pointy end. And again is copper alloy, probably a kind of bronze. And I think this is what's known as a stylus, which is a pointy object used by the Romans for writing. And you would normally write on a sort of wooden tablet, which would be filled with wax. So you could write on the wax and then you could smooth that off and write again. And actually a tablet just like that was found near Trasfynydd, a tablet of Roman date. So we know that that kind of thing was used in Wales. Possibly it could also be used for writing on slate. But this is a very Roman object. Normally you wouldn't expect local people, sort of the local Iron Age people, to be able to write, that it would be somebody with a Roman background probably that could write. But was this somebody who went away and actually became Romanized and learned how to write and came back home? Or was this just an object, an interesting object that they picked up and perhaps used for other things? So we've got really quite an interesting sort of Roman area there with quite a lot of nice finds, suggesting perhaps it was quite high status, quite a lot of things, very Romanized things going on there. And then one of the last few days of the excavation, down near the stream again, we actually found this object or this feature, which is very long sort of trench with rounded ends, very neatly dug, but filled with heat cracked stone. So you've all this stone here filling it, and then in the bottom of it, full of charcoal, including on this close-up, there's actually quite a few pieces of charred branch in the bottom. So this seems to have been basically a fire just sort of left in there undisturbed. And you may have heard me talking about burnt mounds that we get in this area, where hot stones were used to heat up water, possibly for cooking and other things, which were typically dated to the Bronze Age and late Neolithic period. This isn't actually a burnt mound trough. I think this actually had a fire in the bottom, and stones were put onto that fire and heated up. And that makes it sound to me like what I would call an earth oven. So you heat up the stones, you would then place food wrapped up on top of the hot stones and cover it over with turfs, and then the food would cook very nicely in there. And certainly we find sort of small earth ovens in the area, often sort of little round pits. But I've never seen anything like this. But it would be a really good design if you're having a big party. You could lean over and place food along this, and you could cook a lot of food at one go in this earth oven. Sorry, I've just dropped my mouse. So at the moment, my guess is that this could well be a Bronze Age feature. We'll have to get radiocarbon dates to prove this, but I think this might be a Bronze Age oven for doing parties on. So we've got a site here that may well have had Bronze Age activity on it, and then running through into the Iron Age with various roundhouses, and then occupied through into the Roman period. So we've got actually quite a wide range of activity going on in the site. This is just an aerial shot to show you the layout of the things I've been talking about. There's the farmhouse there, and with its barn would have been behind it there. We've got the two timber roundhouses here, and then two stone roundhouses down in the wet bit down there. Up here is where we've got the two Roman period roundhouses, and then all the fields around it. And just a quick shot of some of the finds that we've got. I mentioned a few, but here's a very nice glass bead, which I think this is Roman period glass bead. And we've got quite a few spindle whorls coming out. So these were actually weights at the bottom of a sort of narrow wooden shaft, a spindle. So you could spin it to spin yarn, particularly wool. And then here we've got this slate, which came from the floor of the farmhouse. So this is very much later. But you've got sort of 2, 1, 2, 1, and 2 written on there. So it sort of looks like a kind of tally, but the numbers seem rather too regular for that. So I need to find out what that is. But quite a range of other finds as well. And I see I'm starting to run out of time, but we've got this site with lots going on, but it's in a whole landscape. It's not just on its own. This is a view from the site looking over to Molvaban, which has plenty of Iron Age activity on it. And here we have a plan of the area. So that's our site in the middle. These purple lines are at the edge of scheduled areas. So these are areas so important they've got statutory protection. And the purple dots are Roman period or Iron Age settlements. Molvaban actually has, as well as an Iron Age settlement, it's got a whole series of field walls. So you've got Iron Age fields up there. Down here, you've got Penigaya, which is a small hill fort, and the much bigger hill fort of Pendinas. And then in this area, with all these dots, you've got lots of roundhouse settlements set within Iron Age fields. Now, all of these wouldn't have been occupied at once. They're probably over quite a long period of time. But this gives you some idea of sort of density of occupation and the idea that it's all within these small fields, which would have probably have spread over all this area, apart from perhaps woodland along the river. And these sites have been known about and their significance has been understood for quite a long time. This is a map that accompanied a paper in Archaeological Cambrensis from 1866 showing a lot of these sites. So that's Penigaya and that's the Pendinas camp up there. And actually it was Dilwyn Pritchard from Club Hannes Rachub brought this to my notice, that if you look at Rachub here, there's a site just near it. And actually these have letters sort of showing what these are. And A is a simple circular elliptical enclosure. So we've got an enclosure here, probably stone, and this is exactly where our site is. The scale is basically that symbol covers most of our site. But I think that is probably at the pen near the stream, and that was visible as a definite monument and recognised as being ancient in the late 19th century. And actually, just here, there's another site, and that's called Coedicaf, which is a nice roundhouse settlement. And here we've got an aerial photograph of it. So that's there's a sort of enclosure here which had a couple of roundhouses in, but it's now covered in gorse. But you can see here these nice field boundaries running off it. So these are Iron Age field boundaries. And in fact, some of the boundaries that are still in use or have been in use recently, you can see the way they wander, that suggests they're Iron Age as well. So this gives you an idea of these small fields that would have covered the area. And here back to the Penrhyn map. So that's the enclosure of Coedicaf with its field system coming off it. So you can see on this map, it's shown as this sort of a little enclosure joined into other fields. And if you look over here, you've got another that's almost identical there. And I'm almost certain that actually that is another of these roundhouse settlements. Again, this is Kevin Bedu. So our site is just sort of in here with all our roundhouses, and just outside the site, I think almost certainly there was another roundhouse settlement in there, which gives some idea of the density of archaeology in this area. Though again, as I say, not all occupied at once, but I think almost wherever you dig here, you're likely to come across something. So yeah, so that is the end. I like to finish on this slide. Lot of local people were very interested in what we were doing. Lots of people stopped to talk to us as they went past on the road. And we did manage to get a school visit. So we had some of the children from the local school coming to see what we're doing. But this is one of our regular visitors. I don't think he was very interested in the archaeology, but he certainly seems to have been having some fun. So thank you very much.